Michael Chiesa is back after nearly 2 years away, taking on Kevin Holland. Hey, I got some trivia for you. How many times has Kevin Holland fought since you last fought?
Man, quite a bit. I would say probably close to I would say probably 5 fights, 6 fights.
Yeah, you were right the first time. 5 fights since
Oh,
since you
wow.
last fought. Yeah, I mean he's busy. I mean, I saw your interview with DC and RC, and you mentioned that if you're gonna find somebody who fits the mold of a BMF, Kevin Holland might be a candidate if they do this sort of thing again.
Absolutely. Obviously, when they asked me who would be at the top of my list, I'm a little carb depleted. I should have said Cowboy Cerrone because to me, that is the original BMF. He's got the BMF ranch. He was the anytime, anywhere guy. Early on, you're talking 2014, 2015 Cowboy. That was the original BMF. But Holland, as time goes on, I think he could be in contention to fight for one of these BMF belts. If you go back to the run that he was on in 2020, he was the king of the Apex. He went on a 5-fight run in a calendar year. So yeah, he could definitely be one of those guys, but maybe he can start that run after this fight.
Well, you're excited to be back for fight week. Are you going to be part of the press conference on Thursday?
Yeah, going to be part of the press conference for sure. And I'm excited about that, man. Like, look, I love working the Apex shows as an analyst, but as a fighter, it's like, I've been doing this 11 years and I like going out of town to the fights. I like the press conferences. I like being in fight week, going to new places, getting to experience new memories and stuff. So this is my ideal type of fight week. So yeah, I'll be at the press conference on Thursday.
Well, last time you were on stage with a mouthy guy named Kevin, we remember what happened.
you know, Surprisingly, I've ran into Kevin Holland quite a bit over the last few weeks because of International Fight Week and then Terrence McKinney's Fight Week. Um, so, we've ran into each other quite a bit, and the interactions have been good. It'll probably change at the press conference with him, not so much with me, but that remains to be seen. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, you mentioned Terence McKinney. He trains with Kevin now and previously trained with you, so there's a bit of a connection there.
Yeah, a little bit of a connection, and I'm glad that Terrence is with Kevin. Honestly, I think that that's a good fit for him. I think that Kevin's a good mentor for him, and I think he does a good job kind of keeping a hold on the reins for Terrence. Terrence needs like a mentor, and I think Kevin's the perfect guy. I think it's a good training environment for him. And obviously, I will always have nothing but love for Terrence. He was one of the best kids I ever coached when he was wrestling. We trained together when he moved on to mixed martial arts. Essentially, and he would say this, I helped pave the road for him to get into this sport. But I want what's best for him, and I'm glad that he's down in Houston with Kevin.
Yeah, Terrence is such a genuine, sweet guy, and I've had nothing but great interactions with him. I was very surprised after he lost his most recent fight, and I don't typically do this, but I went and looked at his mentions. He's very active on social media, and man, it's just such a dumpster fire. I don't know how fighters do it when it comes to dealing with losses, because not only do you have to deal with the loss yourself, which I'm sure sucks, but you now have to worry about what other people are saying and having to see all that. Like Molly McCann, for example, this past weekend, people were just piling on her. I don't know what we can do about this sort of thing in combat sports and why people feel like they need to pile on to fighters that lose fights. But what do you think the psychology behind all that is?
Well, I think for one thing, Aaron, I think that like when you talk about Molly and Terrence, it's not like the demographic of fans they appeal to, but they're very popular. Like they're very popular fighters on social media. Terrence is very active on social media. Molly, she really gained a lot of, I want to say stardom, I guess maybe would be the right word, like through all the people at Barstool. And I think that with all that notoriety, you get a lot of heat. So like when you win, you're going to get all the praise, but when you come up short, you're going to get all sorts of people coming out of the woodwork, going out of their way to say negative things to you. And it's an unfortunate thing with this sport. The one thing I wish Terrence would do while we're talking about him is like, just quit responding. Like I get negative hate all the time, but I just don't respond. And I think that when you kind of respond to these people, everybody can see that you're responding. And so there's other jackasses that are like that will talk trash to you on social media. They're like, well, if he's going to respond, then I'm going to say something too. And it just compiles and has this snowball effect. So I think it's best when people talk crap, just leave it alone. Just don't even address it. And not to mention, the people that should be getting your praise or getting your attention are the people that are supporting you. And I think that for a lot of fighters, it's hard. Like it's a little more common to say, hey, see someone, hey, good job, keep your head up. and you just kind of get used to that. And then when someone says something that kind of chaps your ass, you're like, I got to say something back to them. So I think it's important to just give the attention to the people that deserve it and just ignore the people that talk trash. I know it can be hard at times, but I think that that's the best way to avoid that.
Can you explain what it's like losing a fight? Like not exactly the loss itself, but like 2 hours afterwards. What are the feelings going through a fighter's mind? And obviously, there's the temptation, I'm sure, to pick up the phone. But like, what do you do in that situation, and in coping with that sort of thing?
You know what? I'll give you two examples. I'll give you two examples. And I'll talk about my last two fights, which were both losses. There's the losses like Vicente Luque, where I beat myself, where I know I could have done better, where I made mistakes, and look, I have all the praise for Vicente in the world. I think he's a tremendous fighter. He's a tremendous puncher. He's got great skills, but I just know that I beat myself. So I was really hung up on it, like really just mad at myself for like making the mistakes. Like I knew that that was something to avoid, and I just beat myself. And then you look at the Sean Brady fight, and it's like I was in a close fight, tooth and nail, almost had him at the end. I can hang my hat on that. So there's some losses that really sting more than the others. And to me, the ones that sting the most are the ones when you beat yourself, when I made mistakes, when I did things wrong, knowing that like it's like I played into his strengths and I trained against those strengths. I knew what to avoid, and I didn't. So those are the losses that are really hard to digest. But then there's the Sean Brady losses where it's like, dude, you went out on your shield, you fought tooth and nail to the end, you gave him hell. You can hang your hat on that. So for me, in the situations where, the 6 losses that I have, there's the ones where I can be proud of myself, where it's like, hey, I had a good fight. Like Joe Lozon was a good fight. Sean Brady was a good fight. And then there's the ones like Jorge Masvidal and Vicente Luque, Anthony Pettis, fights where I kind of beat myself. I made things hard for myself, and it's hard. Those are harder to digest because I don't feel like it's like, yes, the guy across the octagon beat me, but I also helped him beat myself, So those are the ones that are very hard to digest.
I imagine the Masvidal one, which, by the way, the anniversary of that is 10 years ago tomorrow.
Oh,
That was probably a tough one for you because you had that fight. It was, I believe, that was your first UFC loss, and you just kind of got caught. Like I remember watching that because I can remember I was at a bar called Real Sports in Toronto, a very very famous sports bar here. I just remember watching that fight, and being like, man, like that's a tough one, tough pill to swallow, but also probably a great learning experience.
great learning experience, but it was a great learning experience. But I asked for that. This is the thing that a lot of people don't know about that fight. Joe Silva had given me a favorable matchup leading into that fight, and my opponent got hurt. Or no, he didn't get hurt. It was Reza Madadi. He got caught up in the purse snatching situation. So he gives me a short list of potential guys, and me being the brash, undefeated guy fresh off the Ultimate Fighter was like, none of these guys are tough enough. Who's the toughest fight you have for me? And he's like, well, nobody wants to fight Jorge Masvidal. I said, that's the guy, and I learned a valuable lesson that fight from Jorge Masvidal. I had the best round of my life. And I'll never forget getting off the stool, being pretty fatigued, and he gave me that cold stare. And I thought in my head, like, holy crap, I'm going to have to do that again, probably twice to beat this guy. And he beat me, and it was a very valuable learning experience. If anybody was to hand me my first loss, if I had to pick, it would be him. So that was still a fight. That's why I want to get a fight back in Seattle so bad. It's like I was supposed to fight originally December 8, 2012, my first UFC fight. And then they gave me a second crack at it. And then I got my first pro loss to Jorge Masvidal. And I'm like, I owe Seattle a freaking win, Aaron. I gotta get a UFC win in Washington State. I was hoping for Vancouver this summer because that's fairly close, but the timeline just didn't work out. But I owe the Pacific Northwest a hometown UFC win.
Well, the UFC owes Seattle a card. I mean, they had Demetrius Johnson as champion for the longest time, and when was the last time they were there? It was probably that fight. So hopefully they put that together. Now, we mentioned Kevin Lee and the press conference that you had with him, that kind of famous moment. He retired recently. I'm curious if you have any thoughts about Kevin retiring. I think he's only 30 years old, came back to the UFC for one last go. It didn't go his way. But any reflections on the career of Kevin Lee?
There's a couple things. For one, I kind of chewed him out before the Renat Fakhretdinov fight. He put out that post, and I haven't talked about this on social media. I'm not a big social media guy anymore, you know, he put out that big post saying, you know, the UFC offered me the fight with him when Lee Jingliang fell out, that they offered me Kevin Lee and I turned it down. He put out this big, long, you know, thoughtful post. It was a crock of shit. Like that fight was never offered to me. They could knock on my door right now and offer me Kevin Lee and I would go fight him in this hallway. Like that's a fight I would love to have back. He didn't beat me fair and square. So I kind of had some words with him before the Renat Fakardina fight, because I'm not a social media guy. I'm going to wait till I see you and I'm going to call you out right to your face. But outside of our feud, outside of our history, I wish him nothing but the best. You know, this is a brutal sport. And even though he's 30 years old, you got to look at his body of work. The guy was in a lot of big fights. He won some big fights. He came up short in some big fights. And a lot of fans and pundits alike think that you have to have like your fighting career is a bust if you don't win a world title. Like it was like a failure. It's like, dude, the guy was in a lot of fights. He fought for the championship against Tony Ferguson. He won main events. He lost main events. He had a good career. And I wish him nothing but the best. At 30 years old, he's got all the time in the world to figure out what he wants to do with his life. And look, like as a competitor, I would love to have that fight back. But as a man and somebody that's been entrenched in this sport for 15 years, and I know the ins and outs of it as good as anybody, if not better, I wish him nothing but the best. And I think that with the way that he trained, his tenacity, and all the intangibles that you acquire along this journey of pursuing being a professional fighter, he's going to land somewhere nicely. So as a man, I wish him nothing but the best. As a competitor, I sure as hell would have loved to get that fight back. But those are two completely different things, you know, and the thing that's most important is I wish him nothing but the best for him and the rest of his life.
Well, that's a very thoughtful answer, just like all the answers you give me, Michael. I always love speaking with you for that reason. Thank you for doing this. Great to have you back for Fight Week. It's yourself. Again, against Kevin Holland. It's an excellent fight, UFC 291. Thank you so much for doing this.
Hey, thank you, Aaron. It's always good to talk to you. Yeah, and hopefully one of these days we'll get a fight up in Canada. That's like on my bucket list. I'd love to get a fight up in where what should be my adopted home. You know, I love the Great North. So much love and thank you for having me on.